I never thought handing my baby to the wrong person first would detonate my entire life in less than 48 hours. But here I am. 1 week postpartum, sitting alone in our apartment with a newborn, while my husband's things are gone and the word divorce hangs in the air, thick and suffocating like smoke. My name is Alara. I'm 29. And let me tell you how I managed to destroy my marriage faster than my episiotomy stitches could even begin to heal. The silence in this apartment is a living thing. A week ago, it was filled with Nolan's nervous energy, the sound of him building the crib, his voice humming off-key as he read parenting books aloud. Now, there's just the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional soft coo from the bassinet beside me, and the loud, frantic thumping of my own heart. His side of the closet is a hollow cavern. His coffee mug is gone from the rack. His laptop, his work files, the worn-out sneakers he always left by the door, all vanished. All that's left of him is an envelope on the kitchen counter. I don't have to open it again. The words are burned into my memory, seared onto the back of my eyelids. My daughter, sweet, innocent Isla, stirs in her sleep. She has no idea that her life began at the exact same moment her parents' life together ended. She doesn't know that the man whose eyes she might have, whose stubborn chin she might inherit, now feels like a stranger, a ghost in the home we built together. How did I get here? The question circles and circles, a vulture in my exhausted mind. It wasn't one thing, was it? It was 1,000 tiny cuts. 1,000 moments where I chose wrong, spoke wrong, looked the other way. But it all came to a head in that sterile, white hospital room. With one single, thoughtless gesture, one sentence, let him hold her first. I look at the divorce papers again. The cold black and white print feels like a final judgment, irreconcilable differences. Such a sterile term for a wound so deep and raw. Nolan wouldn't even look at me when he had them served. His brother did it. A final, clean cut. I need to understand it. I need to trace it back. Not just to the hospital, but before. To the beginning of the end. I owe myself that much. I owe it to Isla. I need to walk back through the wreckage and see where the first crack appeared in the foundation. Nolan and I were perfect. Or so I told everyone. So I told myself. We met, we fell in love, we got married after 2 years. It was a whirlwind, the kind you see in movies. Both of us climbing in our careers, him in architecture, me in marketing. We had this gorgeous little apartment with a view of the city skyline, a 5-year plan mapped out on a whiteboard in our office, and a shared belief that we were always on the same page. Or so I thought. The one thing that always seemed to be a quiet, buzzing static in the background of our perfect harmony was my friendship with Julian, my ex from college. Now, before you judge, you have to understand. Julian and I dated for 3 years, from sophomore year until we graduated. We broke up 5 years ago, mutually, realizing we were far better as friends than as lovers. The romance fizzled, but the bedrock of our connection, that never went away. We just never broke the habit of being in each other's lives. When Nolan and I first started dating, he seemed fine with it. He was confident, secure. He'd even hang out with Julian and me, the 3 of us grabbing a beer, laughing. But after we got engaged, something shifted. The comments started. Small things, like little paper cuts. Julian would text me late at night some ridiculous meme or an inside joke from our college days, and I'd laugh out loud. From the other side of the couch, Nolan would look up from his book. What's so funny that he needs to tell you at midnight, Alara? His tone wasn't angry. It was curious. But with an edge I chose to ignore. Oh my God, Nolan, don't be ridiculous, I'd say, rolling my eyes. It's just Julian. You know how he island? There. And I'd go back to my phone, dismissing the flicker of hurt in his eyes. I told myself it was his problem, not mine. His jealousy, his insecurity. He needed to get over it. 9 months after our wedding, I found out I was pregnant. A total accident. I'd missed 2 pills during a friend's destination wedding weekend. My first reaction was sheer, unadulterated panic. A baby wasn't in the 5-year plan. Not in year 1. I was just about to be promoted. We were supposed to travel. But Nolan, he was over the moon. His eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen since our wedding day. Before I had even processed the news, he was downloading parenting apps, reading dad blogs, and ordering books on Amazon. His joy was so pure, so absolute, that it pulled me out of my panic and made me feel excited. We were going to be parents. Around the time we got married, Julian had moved to San Francisco for a job. Honestly, it made things easier. The physical distance put a natural boundary in place that I had been too careless to create myself. But then, 3 months into my pregnancy, his company transferred him back. He immediately appointed himself my pregnancy guardian. He'd show up with the specific brand of ginger candies that helped my morning sickness. He'd text almost daily. "Feeling okay today? Need me to grab you anything on my way home? How's little Bean doing?" Nolan noticed right away. Of course he did. My phone would buzz on the coffee table. I'd pick it up, smile, and start typing. "Julian again?" Nolan would ask, his voice tight. "Doesn't he have his own life to worry about?" "He's just being supportive, Nolan." I'd sigh, my patience already wearing thin. "I don't understand why you can't just appreciate having another person looking out for me, for us." What I failed to see then was that he didn't see Julian as another person looking out for us. He saw him as another man looking out for me. And he wasn't wrong. As my belly grew, so did Julian's presence in our lives. It was insidious, a slow creep I didn't even register as an invasion. When Nolan had to work late, which was often, Julian would conveniently text, "Haven't eaten yet, mind if I bring over some Thai and keep you company?" How could I say no? I was pregnant, tired, and lonely. When Nolan couldn't get away from a meeting to come to a routine checkup, Julian would say, "I have a flexible lunch. I can totally drive you. You shouldn't take the subway alone." It seemed so practical, so helpful. He even came with us to a couple of the childbirth classes. Nolan had a mandatory work seminar on 2 consecutive Saturdays. Julian just happened to be free. "I'll be your backup coach." He'd joked, but he took notes more diligently than I did. He learned the breathing exercises, the pressure points for back labor. Looking back, I can see it so clearly now. The tightening of Nolan's jaw every time Julian inserted himself into another pregnancy milestone. The way Nolan's hand would clench into a fist in his pocket when Julian would put a hand on my back and say, "You holding up okay, Elle?" The breaking point came when I was 7 months pregnant. We were in the nursery, assembling a dresser. My phone buzzed. It was a picture from Julian of a ridiculously expensive stroller he'd seen. The caption read, "Only the best for my little goddaughter." Nolan put down the screwdriver, slowly, deliberately. "Alara, we need to talk." "What's up?" I asked, still smiling at my phone. "This," he said, gesturing vaguely toward my phone, toward the whole situation. "Julian, it's too much." Here we go again, I thought. I braced myself. "What is too much exactly?" "It's not normal, Alara," he said, his voice strained. "It is not normal for your ex-boyfriend to be this involved in our pregnancy, in our marriage. He's just a good friend who cares about me." I shot back, my voice rising. I felt attacked. "You're being controlling, Nolan. You're trying to isolate me when I need support the most." That's when he finally snapped. The quiet frustration he'd been swallowing for months finally erupted. "He's not just a friend, Alara, can't you see that?" he yelled, making me jump. "He is your ex-boyfriend who is clearly still in love with you, and you're either too blind to see it or you enjoy the attention too much to stop it." The accusation hung in the air, vibrating with hurt and anger. I was furious. How dare he? "That is the most ridiculous, insulting thing you have ever said to me," I spat back. I stormed out of the nursery, slamming the door behind me, leaving him standing alone amidst half-built baby furniture and the ruins of our conversation. I was so wrapped up in my own righteous indignation that I couldn't see the desperate plea for help in his eyes. He wasn't trying to control me. He was trying to save us. 3 weeks before my due date, it happened. The contractions started as dull aches in my lower back. Nolan was at a work conference 2 hours away. I called him, and he immediately said he was leaving, his voice a mix of panic and excitement. But an hour later, he called back, stuck in a nightmare traffic jam caused by a multi-car pileup on the interstate. I timed the contractions. They were getting closer, stronger. Panic began to bubble up in my chest. I was alone. It was happening too fast. Without a second thought, I called Julian. He was at my door in 15 minutes flat, a calm presence in my rising storm. He grabbed my hospital bag, helped me down the stairs, and drove me to the hospital, his hand reassuringly on my shoulder as I breathed through another wave of pain. By the time I was checked in and settled in a labor and delivery room, the contractions were intense. Julian was right there. He held my hand, fed me ice chips, and advocated for me with the nurses when I was in too much pain to speak. He remembered the techniques from the childbirth class, pressing on my lower back just the right way. He was amazing. Nolan finally arrived 4 hours later. He burst through the door, looking stressed, disheveled, his tie loosened, and his hair a mess. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. It went from a calm, focused space to a cold, tense triangle. Nolan gave Julian a stiff, cold nod. Julian, who had been sitting right next to my bed in what was so obviously the partner's chair, didn't immediately move. He just sat there, forcing Nolan to come to the opposite side of the bed. "Hey, babe, how are you feeling?" Nolan asked, his voice rough with emotion as he tried to take my hand. "I'm hanging in there," I managed to say, but then another contraction seized me. My body arched in pain and I instinctively turned away from Nolan. I looked right at Julian. "Julian," I gasped. "My back. Can you press on my back, like the nurse showed you?" I didn't see it then, but I can picture it now. The way Nolan's face must have fallen. The way his hand, reaching for mine, must have dropped to his side. He watched as my ex-boyfriend jumped up to help me through the contraction, demonstrating a technique they must have gone over while he, my husband, the father of my child, was stuck on a highway, desperately trying to get to us. The next 18 hours were a blur of pain, exhaustion, and a revolving door of medical staff. Nolan tried. He really did. He tried to take over the support role, but it was awkward. He didn't know the rhythm we had established. He felt like an outsider in the most intimate moment of our lives, and it was my fault. Julian didn't pick up on any of the hints to leave. Or maybe he just ignored them. He stayed through the entire labor, a constant presence in the corner of the room. Finally, at 5:37 a.m., our daughter was born. I was completely and utterly spent. The nurse cleaned Isla up while the doctor finished with me. Nolan had tears streaming down his face. Even Julian looked emotional, standing silently near the door. A few minutes later, the nurse approached my bedside, holding a tiny, perfectly wrapped bundle. "Mama, do you want to hold your daughter?" she asked, her voice soft. This was the moment that shattered everything. I didn't know it then, but my entire future balanced on the edge of my next few words. I looked up, dazed from the delivery, my vision blurry. I saw both Nolan and Julian standing there, looking at the baby with awe. And without really thinking, my brain fogged by exhaustion and hormones, I gestured weakly toward Julian. And I said the words, "Let him hold her first. He's been here from the beginning." The world stopped. The nurse froze, her eyes darting between the two men, her professional smile faltering with uncertainty. Nolan's face went completely white. His mouth opened slightly, like he wanted to say something. But no words came out. The room went dead silent, except for the baby's soft little noises. "Are you sure?" the nurse asked, her voice a hesitant whisper, clearly uncomfortable. "Yeah, it's fine," I said, still not registering the grenade I had just rolled into the middle of the room. "Julian, come meet my daughter." Reluctantly, the nurse placed my newborn daughter into Julian's arms. He looked down at her, his face filled with an expression of pure wonder. "She's perfect, Elle," he whispered. I smiled, tired but happy, feeling this strange sense of completeness seeing him hold her. It wasn't until I glanced over at Nolan that I realized something was terribly, terribly wrong. He'd stepped back against the wall, his face a mask of such profound hurt and shock that it knocked the air out of my lungs. "What's wrong?" I asked, genuinely confused. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a low, shaking whisper that cut through the room. "What's wrong, Alara? You just gave our daughter to your ex-boyfriend to hold before me, before her father." The way he said it, my stomach dropped. But my immediate reaction, my stupid, prideful reaction, was to get defensive. "Oh my God, Nolan, don't make this into a big deal. He was here first. He's been helping the whole time. You'll get to hold her next." "That's not the point," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "That was supposed to be our moment. Mine and yours and our daughter's. Not his." Julian shifted awkwardly, still holding the baby. "Maybe I should give her to you, man," he said to Nolan, finally seeming to read the room. "No. He's just overreacting," I said quickly, turning back to Nolan. "Why are you trying to create drama right now? I just gave birth. Can you please stop making everything about you for 5 minutes?" The hurt in Nolan's eyes deepened, turning into something hard, resigned. Before he could respond, my phone pinged with a notification. While we were arguing, Julian had taken a selfie with the baby and sent it to me. I reflexively checked it. Nolan watched me do it. His expression hardened further. "Seriously?" he said, his voice dripping with disbelief. "You're checking your phone, right now." "It's just a picture," I said defensively, holding up the phone to show him. "Look, see how cute they are together?" He stared at the picture on my screen, my ex-boyfriend, cradling my newborn daughter, and then he looked at me like he had never truly seen me before. "I'm going to get some air," he said finally, his voice flat. He turned toward the door. "Nolan, don't be ridiculous." I called after him. "Come hold your daughter." He paused at the doorway, his back to me. He looked back over his shoulder, not at me, but at the two of them, Julian and the baby. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it echoed in the silent room. "Is she?" he asked. Then he walked out. "He'll cool off," I told Julian, and the increasingly uncomfortable nurse. "He's just tired and emotional." I actually believed it. I rolled my eyes at his dramatic exit, completely oblivious to the fact that he hadn't just walked out of the room. He had walked out of our marriage. The next day in the hospital was a blur of nurses, lactation consultants, and pediatric checks. Nolan was there, physically. He stayed in the room, but he was a ghost. He held Isla silently, his gaze distant. He spent most of his time staring at his phone, his face a blank wall. When Julian texted asking if he could visit, I said yes without even thinking to ask Nolan. When Julian arrived, carrying a massive bouquet of flowers, Nolan's whole body tensed. "I thought we could have some family time today," Nolan said quietly, his eyes on the baby in the bassinet. "We are," I replied cheerfully, completely missing the point. "Julian's just stopping by to check on us." "That's not what family means, Alara." Julian stayed for hours. A nurse came in to check my vitals. She smiled warmly at Julian, who was rocking Isla. "Dad, would you like to do some skin-to-skin with the baby while I work with Mom?" Before I could correct her, Julian laughed. "Oh, I'm not the dad, just the best friend." The nurse's face flushed with confusion, then embarrassment. She stammered an apology. Nolan, who had overheard the whole exchange, didn't say a word. He just walked over to the bassinet, lifted our daughter out, and sat in the chair farthest from Julian, holding her close to his chest. Later that evening, after Julian finally left, Nolan tried one last time. "Alara," he said, his voice weary. "We need to discuss some boundaries." "What boundaries?" I asked, distracted as I scrolled through the pictures Julian had sent me. I was trying to choose the best one to post on Facebook, thinking of a caption. Something like, "Isla's first day with her favorite people. Liam being here all the time," he said. "The nurse, she thought he was the father. Don't you see how messed up this is?" I looked up from my phone, annoyed. "No, I don't. He's being supportive while you're being weirdly jealous. He drove me to the hospital, Nolan. That should have been me, he said, his voice cracking with a pain so raw it should have stopped my heart. I'm her father. I'm your husband. And I feel like I'm being pushed out of my own family before it's even started. You're being ridiculous, I said, dismissing him completely. No one is pushing you out. You're making a big deal out of nothing because of your insecurities. He didn't say anything else that night. He just retreated back into his silence. The next morning, it was time to go home. He was quiet, but he helped me shower. He helped me get dressed. He packed up our things. He was gentle with Isla. I thought maybe he was getting over it. Julian might stop by later, I mentioned casually as I put Isla into her car seat. He said he picked up some groceries for us. Nolan stopped folding a baby blanket. He looked at me, his eyes empty of all the warmth they once held for me. Alara, I don't want him at our apartment today. Why not? He's just dropping off groceries. Because I would like one day. Just one day. With you and our daughter. Without your ex-boyfriend being involved. I sighed, a long, dramatic, impatient sound. You're still on this? I thought you would have gotten over it by now. Gotten over what, exactly? He asked, his voice dangerously calm. The fact that you keep disrespecting our marriage? That you care more about his feelings than mine? That you seem to want him more involved in our daughter's life than her own father? Now you're just being absurd, I said, shaking my head. Julian is just a friend who's being helpful. Nolan stared at me for a long moment. It felt like he was seeing me clearly for the first time, and he didn't like what he saw. I need to get some air, he said finally, grabbing his jacket. I'll be back before discharge. Discharge was at noon. At 11:30 I was all packed and ready, but Nolan hadn't returned. I texted him. Where are you? We're ready to go soon. No response. By noon, I was getting annoyed. The nurse came in with the paperwork, and I had to tell her my husband wasn't back yet. By 12:30 I was genuinely worried. I called his phone. Straight to voicemail. By 1 p.m., my worry had curdled into fury. He was doing this on purpose, to punish me. Fine. I called Julian. Can you come pick us up? Nolan has disappeared. When we got to the apartment, Julian carrying Isla in her car seat, I knew something was wrong the second I walked in. The air was different. Empty. Then I saw it. His suitcase was gone from the closet. The hooks by the door where he kept his keys and work badge were bare. On the kitchen counter was a single white envelope with my name on it, written in his familiar, sharp handwriting. My hands started to shake. I handed the baby carrier to Julian and tore it open. Alara, the letter began. I can't do this anymore. The past few days have made it painfully clear that I am not a priority in your life, or in our daughter's. I have tried to talk to you about your inappropriate relationship with Julian multiple times, but you refuse to see or acknowledge how your actions hurt me. Having my child handed to another man before me was the final straw. It wasn't just an action. It was a symbol of everything that is broken between us. I need some space to think about whether this marriage can be saved. I'll be staying at my brother's place for now. I'll reach out about arrangements to see the baby. Please don't contact me for a few days. Nolan. The letter dropped from my trembling fingers onto the counter. He left. He actually left. What's wrong? Julian asked gently, rocking Isla. He left, I breathed. Nolan left. He took his stuff and left. Tears welled up in my eyes. Not sad tears. Angry tears. Who does that? Who leaves their wife and newborn baby? What kind of man does that? Let me see, Julian said, leaning over to read the letter. He whistled softly. Wow, that's intense. It's completely irresponsible is what it is. I fumed, the anger a welcome shield against the gaping hole of fear opening in my chest. I just had a baby, his baby, and he's throwing a tantrum because I let you hold her first? Who cares who held her first? Julian shifted uncomfortably. I mean, I can see how that might have been important to him. Not you two, I snapped. He's being ridiculous. All, but for the first time, a tiny, cold seed of doubt began to sprout in the pit of my stomach. The next few weeks were a hellish limbo. I posted a passive-aggressive rant on Facebook about fathers who abandoned their newborns, which earned me a lot of sympathy from people who didn't know the full story. I tried to project an image of a strong, wronged single mother. Inside, I was crumbling. Nolan finally reached out via text to arrange seeing Isla. He was cold, formal. When he came over, he looked terrible. He'd lost weight, his eyes were red-rimmed, and he barely looked at me. He just held Isla, his face a mixture of love for her and pain for everything else. I tried to talk to him, to argue, to defend myself. But it was like talking to a brick wall. It wasn't that big a deal, Nolan. You're overreacting. It was to me, Alara, he said simply. And the fact that you still can't see that is exactly why I needed to leave. Though, then the official papers arrived. Divorce papers. Carter had filed. The grounds were irreconcilable differences, but the detailed allegations mentioned an inappropriate emotional relationship with a third party. I was furious. How dare he imply I cheated? I called my old college friend, Maya, who was a family attorney. These accusations are insane, Maya. I told her over the phone after forwarding her the documents. I never cheated on Nolan. Da Grazera. Maya was quiet for a long moment after reading them. Alara, she said carefully. Emotional infidelity doesn't necessarily mean physical cheating. It means prioritizing another person emotionally over your spouse. It means creating an intimacy with someone else that should be reserved for your partner. Based on what you've told me, there might be some validity to his claims. What? You're supposed to be on my side. I am on your side, she said patiently. But I'm also telling you that courts don't look favorably on situations where one spouse has a very close, boundary-crossing relationship with an ex. As if that weren't bad enough, the next blow came a week later. As part of the divorce proceedings, Nolan was formally requesting a paternity test. That's insulting, I hissed at him during our next tense baby handoff. You know she's yours. He looked at me then, really looked at me, his eyes searching my face for something. Do I? Alara, he asked, his voice void of emotion. Because from where I'm standing, it seems like you and Julian have been a lot closer than you've ever admitted. As I watched him walk away, I felt sick to my stomach. It wasn't just anger at the accusation. It was a tiny, cold spark of fear. There was one night, about 10 months ago, Nolan was away on a business trip. Julian had just moved back to town, and we went out for drinks to celebrate. We'd both gotten pretty wasted. My memory of the end of the night was fuzzy. I remembered laughing a lot. I remembered him walking me to my door. I remembered something else. A blur. I'd woken up the next morning in my own bed, fully clothed, with a splitting headache and a vague sense of unease I had pushed down and buried. Until now. I finally worked up the courage to ask Julian about it. His reaction only amplified my anxiety. A paternity test? He repeated, his face going oddly blank. Why would he want that? I looked him straight in the eye. Julian, is there any reason? Any reason at all that this test might not show Nolan as the father? He swallowed, his gaze shifting away from mine. We just kissed, Elle. That's all. You were really drunk. You passed out right after we kissed. That's it. That's it? I pressed, not entirely believing him. Yes, that's it, he insisted. But something in his eyes, a flicker of something, made me wonder if he was telling the whole truth. The court-ordered paternity test was scheduled for when Isla was 6 weeks old. The day of the test was sterile and impersonal. A cheek swab for Nolan, a cheek swab for Isla, and then we waited. Those were the longest 5 days of my life. On the 5th day, my phone rang. It was Nolan. I got the results, he said. His voice was hollow. Can you meet me at the park near my brother's place? He was waiting on a bench, staring at the ground when I arrived. Isla was asleep in her carrier. I sat down beside him, a chasm of silence between us. Just tell me, I said, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't look at me. He just pulled an envelope from his jacket and handed it to me. My hands trembled so badly I could barely open it. I skimmed past the legal jargon, the scientific explanations, until my eyes found the conclusion. Based on the analysis, the alleged father, Nolan Hayes, is excluded as the biological father of the tested child, Isla Hayes. The probability of paternity is 0%. The world tilted sideways. The sounds of the park children laughing, dogs barking faded into a dull roar. No, I whispered. No, there must be some mistake. There's no mistake, Nolan said, his voice as empty as his eyes. I had them run it twice. No. Nolan, I don't understand. I started to sob, the lie I had told myself for months finally crumbling into dust. How could this happen? I didn't think. Save it, he said, finally looking at me, his face a mask of utter devastation. The facts speak for themselves. Please, I begged, tears streaming down my face. I honestly didn't know. I was so sure she was yours. He looked down at the sleeping baby in her carrier, and for the first time, I saw his eyes fill with tears. His voice broke. So was I, he said quietly. But she's not mine, and you've been lying to me our entire marriage. I wasn't lying, I insisted, even as the fuzzy memory of that night became terrifyingly clear in my mind. I really thought, stop, he cut me off, standing up. Even if you didn't know for sure, you knew it was a possibility, and you never said a word. You let me fall in love with a child that wasn't mine. He took a deep, shuddering breath. I'm done, Alara. End of teen. What happens now? I cried, calling after him as he turned to leave. He paused, looking back one last time. Now? Now you call Julian, and you tell him he's a father. I called Julian from that same park bench, my world in ruins around me. The results came back, I said, my voice breaking. She's not Nolan's. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Are you sure? He finally asked. Yes, I sobbed. Which means, she's yours, Julian. You're her father. Another silence, longer this time. I need some time to process this, he said, his voice distant. Can I call you back? He didn't call back. Not that day, not the next. When I finally reached him 3 days later, his tone was formal, detached. I need to think about what this means for my life, Alara. This wasn't part of my plan. It wasn't part of my plan either, I snapped, a surge of rage cutting through my grief. But she exists, and she's your responsibility too. No. I know, he said quickly. I just need some space to figure things out. Space. That's what they all wanted. Nolan wanted space from me, Julian wanted space from his responsibilities. And I was left alone in the wreckage with a baby whose very existence had shattered my life into unrecognizable pieces. Julian eventually agreed to his own DNA test, which of course confirmed he was the father. But he was hesitant, evasive. He offered financial support but balked at the idea of regular visitation or overnight stays. I'm just not ready to be a dad, Elle, he admitted during one of our increasingly tense phone calls. That's when I finally broke. Neither was I screamed into the phone. But it's a little late for that, isn't it? You wanted to be so involved when you thought she was Nolan's baby. You were right there, holding her first, playing house in my marriage, and now that you find out she's actually yours, you're running away? That was different, Julian muttered. I was just being supportive then. And in that moment, the truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. No, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous calm. You were marking your territory. You loved the idea of undermining my marriage, of being the hero, the one I turned to instead of my husband. You just didn't want the actual responsibility that came with it. He had no answer for that. 2 months later, my divorce from Nolan was finalized. The last time I saw him was at the lawyer's office to sign the final papers. He looked better. He had his color back. There was a peace in his eyes that I hadn't seen in years, a peace that came from leaving me behind. As we parted ways on the courthouse steps, he turned to me. "I hope you find happiness, Alara," he said, and I could tell he genuinely meant it. There was no malice left, just sadness. "I'm sorry," I replied, the words feeling pathetic and woefully inadequate for the scale of the damage I had caused. "For everything." He just nodded and walked away. My daughter, Isla, is 6 months old now. She has Julian's dark, curly hair in my eyes. Sometimes, late at night, when the apartment is quiet and she's finally asleep, I scroll through old photos on my phone. Pictures of Nolan and me, back when we were happy, back when our future seemed limitless. I think about all the moments when I could have made a different choice. All the times I could have respected his feelings, set a boundary with Julian, and put my husband first. I thought letting my ex hold my baby first was a cute, progressive moment between friends. A harmless gesture. Instead, it was the final straw that broke my marriage before we even left the hospital. It was the symptom of a sickness I had allowed to fester for years. I've learned, the hardest way possible, that relationships have boundaries for a reason. They aren't about jealousy or possessiveness. They are about respect, about trust, about consciously choosing to make your partner your priority, your safe harbor, your one and only. It's a lesson I just learned far, far too late. And now, I have to live with the consequences of that first, single, catastrophic mistake every single day.